Well, the snow's finally melting here. Is it finally getting warm in New York? It's like, I
70
mean,
Saturday.
it's literally like I thought this day would never come. I really
Is it
in
nice
in
where
the
you
deep
are?
and it's today it's a little bit cloudy, but yesterday it got to be 62 and the breeze was warm. I mean, I could feel it, and it was very windy, and I thought, "Oh, I better bundle up," and I went out, and it was like, it felt like a tropical breeze. And I was just like, "Oh my god, this is." I literally thought this day would never come, and I don't know if you remember this, but I missed my entire summer last summer.
Yeah.
I
How was
missed
your
the
back?
whole summer. It actually
Holy
feels
shit.
good.
Varla, I think the honey like worked a lot.
I know, it's
I think this
amazing.
is like the best it's been in a long time.
You cannot overdo it with honey. It will not hurt you. It will help you. And it does, just
Oh man, I'm going for more. I think
go
this is
for
going to be the
more.
best
No,
podcast
really.
ever.
Honey and a little bit of, you said you put it in tea, but if you could make just a little bit of like warm water and put some of the honey in that, or use the warm water to sort of rinse it down. I think if you just keep doing that. The other thing is that honey has a lot of like I know you said it's Costco honey, but honey does have a lot of like immune boosting properties and
Yeah.
helps with allergies and stuff. So if what you have going on is at all like environmental related, it could also help with that just by kind of,
Doing some good
different
stuff in
things.
there.
So
God, man, that's just one shot. I just put some honey in my throat and it's like incrementally getting better. But I'm also talking. I've been up, I talked to my wife for like 30 minutes this morning. And beyond that was my children who, you know, they got raspy. They got rasped at. And then you get actual conversation. You're the first person all day long. So maybe as I talk, it'll warm up a little bit.
yeah, we'll keep that honey and some like warmish water near. And I'm just trying to think of the other things that have helped me. I mean, there's lots of herbs and things you can take. But I
Yeah.
can hear you mixing up the honey.
Yeah.
No, I will go through a whole bottle of honey when I'm having throat issues. So
My only experience with the weather where you are comes from American Gods. They drive a car out in the middle of the lake while it's frozen, and then
okay, they
it
do that
thaws. And
here, and it's
I
so
don't know. I was going to
freaky.
ask you
Like,
if they did.
yes, it's very common in all the little towns around the kind of St. Paul area. There's people go ice fishing, and they drive trucks and set up little ice huts and stuff like that. And
Oh,
now I'm from California. We don't do that in California. It doesn't ever get, even in the mountains up in the Sierras where I lived most of my life, it doesn't get, I mean, most of my childhood, I should say, it gets cold and things freeze over. And we would go on ponds and stuff and like that occasionally in the winter, but it doesn't ever, it's like the ice is very thin and it melts away. So it'll snow
yeah.
and then it will get to be in the 40s. Here it's totally different. It snows on the warmer days, which means it snows when it's in the 20s. And then the other days are really cold. So the ice
Well, that's the way it works
apparently,
everywhere, right? Here too. Like if it's really cold, it's not going to snow. You're safe. But it warms up to like 33 degrees. Then you start wondering, oh no, is it going to snow?
yeah. Well, so it's kind of just complete opposite of what I'm used to. Also
Right?
never
It gets
had
cold and it
thunderstorms
snows.
in the winter, but
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
so
really?
so the ice thing. Okay, so the ice. So they say that when it's frozen down 12 inches or something like that, it can support like I don't know some crazy amount. Like you can drive a truck on it. And the first time I saw it, I swear to you, I was so terrified for the people driving. And they don't drive it. There's always someone kind of at the beginning of the year and the end of the year that they either go out too soon or they stay out too a little too late. Like right now, you wouldn't want to have anything on the lake because it's all the lakes are there's ice there still, but it's
Yeah.
melting. But I finally walked. I mean, it took me an entire winter of seeing that before the following winter I was actually willing to walk out on the lake. And it was because I did it for art.
Oh,
I did it for art's sake. There was an art installation on the lake,
okay.
and I I wanted to see it. and we what happened is I actually parked, and they directed me to park in this parking lot, and I thought, okay, this looks mostly like what the parking lot looked like, in the summer, but I hadn't been down there much. It was just in this lake north of me. So I walk out, and I'm carefully walking, it's just kind of snow covered ice, not a big deal. There's lots of people out there. And then I realized that I parked on the lake.
Oh shit.
And of course I just had that moment of like, this is completely terrifying. And then I looked around me, and there's children galloping and somebody riding some sort of robotic horse and an art installation across the lake. All of these shanties with they look like ice huts, but inside each one is like a different art experience. Some guy had a giant birdhouse. I mean, all this really cool stuff. And I was like, okay, well, if anything happens, it's going to happen to all of these people. So me running scared off the lake isn't going to really change anything. And then I also remembered that lakes don't have currents, well, at least not of that size. And that, at most, if I fell through, I'd probably be where I was standing, I would probably be up to my waist. So it's not like standing on ice on a rushing river, which is a totally terrifying thing I would never do. That's the movie scenario that you're always afraid of. But
yeah. Or walking across a glacier or something. You know what I mean? It's not that. It's
no,
different experience.
It's not glacier quality, no.
Okay,
so I'm glad your throat's feeling a teeny bit better.
It doesn't hurt. That's the problem. It doesn't hurt at all. It just bothers me to talk.
Yeah. Okay.
It just feels so tight, and like my chest areas like don't have the something to get it out. It's awful. But it doesn't hurt. Like there's no pain. I could talk all day. And I just get more tired in that diaphragm area.
But that does kind of make it seem like it's nothing related to your throat. Here, we're going to play let's diagnose Bryan.
Let's do it.
Well,
we're talking about trauma, and we're supposed to talk about trauma anyway, aren't we?
Yeah, right. So trauma of illness is probably one of the greatest traumas that we all can share to a certain extent. I have had a conversation recently with a dear friend of mine who was diagnosed with cancer at a very young age. She
scary.
had to have a bilateral mastectomy. She had to have chemotherapy. She had to have radiation on top of that. She's got a young child, and she's cancer-free now. But there's so much post-cancer trauma. She's actually writing a book about how to survive after you survive, because it's such a and she's been very helpful for me, because sometimes I would say, well, I feel bad, like even comparing my own health issues, because mine weren't life-threatening. They were just incredibly painful and debilitating, but my life wasn't on the line. It felt like
it was, though, wasn't it? You went into the knife. You went into surgery. I mean,
well, I guess so. I did have surgery,
anesthesia.
So that's always, and I couldn't have gone on living in the way that I was. And she said, that's a situation where it doesn't matter what your illness is. It's your own experience, and it's your own. It's debilitating in your life, and there are a lot of commonalities with recovery. And it's that we talk about the illness a lot, and we even talk about the trauma, maybe not a lot, but sometimes. But we don't always talk about the after effects. Okay, now you're quote unquote cured, so get back to it. But you're not normal. You're not the same.
No, you have that pain inside you.
And you probably won't ever be quite the same.
Nope. What'd you do? You fell downstairs, right?
No, I fell on ice. So I slipped on an ice patch in my own yard, and fell
in your yard.
In my yard.
Supposed to be safe on yard.
And I hit my head. And I was, and the thing is I didn't even know I had injured any part of my body, because I hit my head and I had a concussion, which is, I'm not, shock of the century. I wasn't a big sport kid. So
but you made it to, X number of years without wiping out, ruining your back and cracking your head on the ground.
Yeah, I had
So
never had a
until that point,
concussion though, so I didn't
you
even
were
know when
safe.
I had the concussion that I had a concussion.
Afterward, not safe anymore. Now you got something to worry about. You're a different person. You have
And
to be
that's
careful.
yes,
You're
and every
vulnerable.
step I took, whenever it was real icy, I just didn't go out as much, and
Yep.
I definitely gained a lot of perspective and
Yeah.
patience with myself, but I at the same time can completely see how somebody who doesn't have the support system could very easily give up at this stage. Really
Well,
like
exactly. Right. And I can use myself as an example. When I was 16 years old, I played football. I played football my entire high school academic career. My sophomore year, I got slammed from behind, wasn't paying attention. I was watching this guy score a touchdown who went on to the University of Florida and a burglary career. Um, but he scored a touchdown. And I was watching him, and I got sucker punched from behind, flew in the air, landed on my left elbow, and snapped my arm in half. I had horrible nerve damage. I couldn't move my hand or my like below the elbow. Couldn't move my arm for months. I
and you
crawled
were
back.
16, you
16
said?
years old.
Yeah.
Potentially, I in memory was the strongest kid in my class. I was putting up weight nobody else could. I was on the varsity team from my freshman year. I mean, my path was set towards something other than,
Yeah.
the army when I turned 18. Potentially in my head, fantasy wise, that's what that trauma did. It ended things. It just stopped
Well, and
because it
think
did. It
about
added a vulnerability to it. When I played football now, I had to be careful because that asshole is going to be there to knock me
right,
out because
you're
I'm having
always
a good
it's
game or
always in
whatnot.
the back of your mind, and think about too,
Yeah.
like, maybe if something like that happened to you as an adult, that 6 months recovery, even though when you're staring at it, it
Lifetime.
seems like a long time, but when you're
Lifetime, isn't it? It's
16,
lifetime.
that's more than half your school year, that's a huge chunk of your development at that age, so it can
I did
really
it in November. I can tell you the exact date. It was November 6th or November 5th. My brother's birthday was the very next day. And I played football again that spring for spring football, earned black jersey status and everything. I mean, my arm had atrophied to nothing. And I think there was some kind of argument about insurance because my dad was in the army. So the school didn't want to pay for it, but the military insurance was complete shit. So I didn't even get a cast on the thing. They like put it in some kind of RoboCop deal. But I mean, as far as like
See, that's
being
that's
vulnerable,
kind of related to what, like, we like to talk about how that might relate to like trauma in the arts or whatever. But when I think I had mentioned to you before that I see those kind of situations, like what you went through. For me, just that kind of the negotiations between insurances
yeah,
and that's where I find that Alice in Wonderland kind of um, overlay when I think of I was sitting on my deck one day completely frustrated because I had gotten a letter from an insurance company, my insurance company, that said I owed them $18,000. And in my other hand, I had a letter from the insurance company saying that not to pay. And it was the same insurance company, same letterhead, totally different people. And it was like one side will make you grow smaller and the
yeah,
other side will make you. I mean, I was literally holding two pieces of paper that said completely different things. And I thought,
yeah,
if I were the kind of person that was really overwhelmed by authority and what people told me to do, I would not be able to handle this. But, some people live in fear of not paying their bills on time. I'm kind of like, I do my
yeah.
best.
To the chagrin of their health, right? I know of people who will be diagnosed with something horrible, and that'll be the end of the story. They won't go any farther. They won't get any other treatments. They won't get any other help. They'll ride that cancer diagnosis straight into a grave, not doing one thing different. You know what I mean? Not even one chemo
Yes.
session, not even another doctor's appointment, shutting it out of their mind like it doesn't exist.
It's kind of and you can see how very easily, even if you have like for in your case, you had your parents advocating for you, right?
My
Or
mom, yeah.
yeah, you had your mom advocating for you. You had, these kind of different ways of people saying, okay, well, this is who's going to pay for it. Now that does not allow you to recover. That doesn't allow you to heal, or
Oh, it
because
ruins it, doesn't it?
so imagine if you don't have that. So I luckily was able to. I had health insurance. I was still cognizant enough to be able to make phone calls. I took a lot of notes, and my sister had been through something not similar, but she had been through something very traumatic with her husband, and she wasn't here, but she would coach me on the phone. She would say, get a notepad. And even if you think you're going to remember what that insurance person says, or when you go to the doctor, you can even ask to record the conversation if you think you're not going to remember, or, call me, put me on speakerphone. I'll listen, because sometimes you don't hear the same thing that other people hear. So,
Do
sorry, I
you
just
see
had a
that?
little thing pop up. I'm going to get rid of it. It made a little
Oh,
noise
okay.
there. My
I
apologies.
did not. Oh, don't worry about sound.
Okay, it's gone.
Everybody who's listening to this right now is braver than I've ever been in my entire life. What's wrong with that poor guy's voice? He's going to listen to an hour of it.
Actually, you
Please
sound
don't
better
ever stop
already.
talking.
You
Do
sound
I?
better already. You do. You actually do.
Man, it warms up a little bit. I can get it to sound a little better. Just like after a few hours of not talking, it's scary. I only listen to the beginning parts of my podcast now because I can't stand it. Hopefully it gets better. I don't know. Maybe it's subconscious.
No, it's probably some kind of like something in your chest. You said that was, it's probably some kind of influenza type thing that's just settled in your chest for some
In there,
reason.
right? Just want to get
Yeah.
out.
It'll get out, but you're going to have to probably, purge it somehow.
Well, I ran 5 miles yesterday, and I was hacking lungs up
I
when
bet
I
you
got
were.
home.
Oh God.
It's
You
so
probably
cold and gross.
maybe don't do that.
Why? It's like the best experience ever. I'm doing a 10K in the end of April, so I have to at least try.
Well, I'm going to recommend a couple herbs for you to try to kind of heal your chest, and you can do it or not do it. But one of the best things that you can use for kind of healing your chest and lungs is an herb called mullein. It's spelled Mullien. It doesn't have a much of a taste. It's just kind of got a kind of a green teaish, earthy taste. You can buy it at Whole Foods usually, or any other kind of health food store. You don't usually see it in a pre-processed tea. You usually have to buy the dried herb. But you
can you just get that?
What's
like
that?
Over the counter, or do I have to go to
It's not
like the local herbologist?
No. You can just go to anywhere that sells bulk herbs, which like Whole Foods, most Whole Foods do have a bulk herb section. And mullein is very common. It's really, really light. So it's extremely inexpensive because it's sold by the ounce, and it's really light and fluffy. It's got a real kind of softness to it. In fact, the plant itself, the leaves are very soft. And it is good for a huge number of things. But one of the best things it's for is chest congestion and lung issues. And it's just very healing and mild. It can't hurt you. If you have mullein tea with honey, it won't hurt you. It doesn't have a lot of like contraindications. I've never even heard of anybody having an allergy to it. And the good thing about it is that it's native all over the United States. So it's readily available. It's not foreign necessarily. So there's probably a variety. And you should be, if you have a health food store, and you can buy.
I don't know. Do we have them in New York? I would imagine we have anti-health stores where they sell, and they call them like, there's like sandwich shops now with like muscle sandwiches, supposedly for keto or caveman diets or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I just know things are just not happening healthy there. Anyway.
Not healthy happening. It's so funny when I think of that. You call it like the caveman diet, but then yet like that's so maybe we're moving toward the caveman diet, like to counter the Me Too movement or something. It's just like, okay, we can't drag you down the street anymore by your hair. So now we're gonna, I don't know, probably get some guff for saying that. But you know what I mean? There's like this kind of primal movement in terms of food, and then there's a much higher evolution in terms of social movements. So, but
Right. We live in such an interesting age.
you know what I just realized?
Right.
You might actually
What?
be able to get Mullen capsules or Mullen supplements, which is not the ideal. I would much rather see you taking a tea because I think you need to have it go down your throat and into your, travel down your esophagus. But I think you can get the pills at like Walgreens or something like that.
Okay.
And I think also elderberry is good for that, and that's very readily available, and I know you can buy those pills, like, just, capsules, and that has a little bit of a better shelf life, but the Mullen tea would be, like, I'm
Oh,
just
what was the
feeling
other
it.
one you said? I was thinking about my mind went someplace else. You said Mullen tea. What was the other one?
Elderberry.
Elderberry. Okay. I've heard of elderberry. I think I even have
Do you
elderberry
have, like,
downstairs.
those in San Francisco, we had this cool pharmacy chain called Pharmaca. I know it sounds like a place where you get marijuana, but it's not, and you could go and
We don't
get
have anything like that up here. I wish we did.
I
God, I
mean,
wish
you
we'd
could
get
go
on
there
to
and
it.
you could get Advil and, toilet paper, but you also could get you could actually there was usually an herbalist on staff who would come and help you pick out what you needed. You could do homeopathic treatments. Um, yeah, I bet we can
Interesting.
find something within your area, and if you can't, can you just let me know, and I have things here, I can send you something.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm not even going to the doctor. That's how little I care. I'm not that I don't care.
Well, just let me
Not
know
that I
when
don't care, but I'm just so hopeful that eventually one day it'll be gone.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
at one point it was really bad and I couldn't talk. I had to cancel on you. I think I rescheduled. I don't know what happened, but you were going to get canceled on if you didn't get canceled on. I couldn't talk. I just couldn't get words out. It hurt. It's like just straining, like forcing it. It's awful. And it's
Yeah,
much better now. Like now we can actually have a conversation.
now you can have a conversation. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Not that I don't care because it is scary to have something wrong with you that's impacting your desires. You know, you're preventing me from running or doing this or that. And it's like inside, I can't make it better. And it's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know. And there's definitely a big disconnect between um, self-healing and modern medicine in many
Mm.
ways. Now, I was fortunate because I live in the St. Paul area. The medicine here is quite progressive. It's not that far from the Mayo Clinic. There are a lot of doctors that come to this area to study and work at the teaching hospitals. So my regime, even though it was super frustrating for me, was not take this pill and you'll be better in 3 days. I mean, it kind of was at first, but there was a lot of preventative and well, I did aqua therapy, I did all of the nothing worked for me in my particular case, but there was actually, much to my surprise, in the physical therapy session, a counseling session that went along with your first physical therapy session to talk to you about your relationship with pain. And I was totally surprised by that because I thought, I was so in my head and in so much pain that I didn't want to think about my relationship with pain. I just wanted my pain to end. And I didn't want to take any responsibility for my own pain at that point because I was already carrying more than I thought I could handle. But they were right. They were completely right. And they sent me home with some things. And I did have to think about it a little bit. There is a little bit of a mind over matter, or maybe a lot of mind over matter with that kind of thing, where you are thinking,
Yeah.
okay, the power of, I mean, we've seen evidence that positive energy can change water molecules, right? There's that, what's his name? I want to say it's like Marimoto or something like that. And he did this whole experiment where he actually showed, I think there's even a documentary about him, and he put water in a room with people with full of positive energy and then looked under a microscope and saw that the water molecules had actually changed, and also did something where like people were thinking sad and horrid thoughts and showed um, that the molecules could actually change. And that was just kind of showing
Fascinating.
scientific evidence that our thoughts and our feelings can affect how we heal or how we overcome things.
What comes to mind for me, there's a guy, he's Finnish. I can't remember his name. It's really going to be helpful because I can't remember any specifics about him. But what he does is he submerges himself in sub-freezing waters and will breathe. You know, he will do these incredible things like hold his breath for minutes and minutes at the time, and then go run ultra marathons or something. And it's just like,
yes, I know who you're talking about. I don't know his name either,
it's
but
got an awesome name.
But it's his whole thing is that he is really like mind over matter, and we've talked
mind over doing it. Like he's making decisions that his body doesn't want to make, but his mind is making his body do it. It's interesting.
Well, we've talked before about the Korean I think it's the Jeonju women who dive down for pearls and abalone and things like that, and they actually dive down several, I don't know, like 30 meters or something, but they can hold their breath underwater, and some of them can hold their breath underwater for like 10 minutes. And I actually was just in last week. I was in the Florida Keys doing a little pirate research. You know,
good for you.
Bottle of rum and all.
As you do, and then the Keys. I mean, you end up the libraries down in the Keys are the most magnificent in the world when it comes to pirates.
And I was at an environmental center, and I saw this awesome video about a movie about this woman who kind of has a very mermaid-like quality to herself as well, and she has trained herself to hold her breath underwater for several minutes at a time, and just she opens her eyes underwater. She just has trained her body to be able to do it, just like you train for a marathon. But it is, anytime you think of things like that, you know, there's a moment in which we panic. Now, I'm not suggesting that people go and hang out underwater to see if they can do it. You know, it's a little bit at a time that you kind of train yourself to do this. You don't go from the couch and jump into a marathon. However, there was another guy I read about 5 years ago, and he lived in the Bay Area where I lived, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I read about him in the local paper, and he was in his 40s, I think. Maybe it was even his 50th birthday. It might have been his 40th birthday, but he woke up and he was supposed to be at a wedding in like, I'm going to just make up the towns because I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was something like, you know, he lived in Santa Cruz and he needed to be at a wedding in Santa Rosa. And that's a 100 and something mile difference. And it's quite a trek. It would take you by car, maybe 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer, depending on, you know, how fast you drive.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this guy just woke up one day and he said, you know what, I'll meet you there, to his family. And he just started running and he ran all the way there, and he became
Forrest Gump style.
Totally, just like, and you just, you know, it's interesting.
That's interesting too. Forrest Gump did that in relationship to trauma, didn't he? He lost somebody and decided to start running.
That's
right.
Or
he was heartbroken and started running.
Yes, that's right. He just kept going and going, kind of. And I think a lot of people do use exercise to get over trauma. I mean, I know when I am feeling like I basically want to slash the world, if I go for a run or even just a walk, or do something like, you know, kickboxing or something that involves punching something, that can also be really, really restorative. But you can kind of work through some of those things, but then you have the distraction of your body. And what can be very debilitating about trauma, especially, is when you don't have those tools because you're physically limited.
You're like me. You're a writer. You're an imaginative soul. Do you spend time thinking about your body dwindling down to no use at all? Having no abilities and having the function that you currently take for granted disappearing? I mean, will you even notice that it's gone as it's going?
You know,
the aging process. I mean, do you spend time thinking one day there's going to be a moment where you can't catch that breath and you're going to not just have an opportunity to take another one? You know what I mean? The trauma of our existence is profound.
but I certainly, after my injury and being completely bedridden for months, that that I mean, the only thing I'll say is that my pain did not allow me time to think. My pain
You've given
only,
birth before, right? I mean, so
yeah,
pain is not at that point wasn't new. It's a different type of
this
pain,
this
but you
was
knew that you
worse
could.
than birth, because at the end of birth, you get a baby. At the end of this, you just have more pain and then recovery. So
You
it was
regret,
a
don't you?
different
Damn it!
experience for me.
Why did I slow down and watch that guy run? I was supposed to be running. I was supposed to be running full tilt towards the end zone. By some miracle, I maybe would have caught that guy running a 4-second 40. Why didn't I? And you regret stepping on that slick
Oh,
piece of ground,
100%.
right?
I regret
Yeah.
the shoes I was
Damn it.
wearing. I regret you know, every decision I made up until
Huh.
that point. I regretted moving to a place that had ice like that because
Why did you do that? I just
yeah,
don't
why
understand
did
that.
I do that? And why did I put myself in a position where, and the thing is what had gotten me through the long dark winters was that I took it as a challenge to go outside every day. I took my dog for a walk every single day. Didn't matter if we only walked around the block because it was below zero, but every day I did it to feel something each day. And
Yeah.
not being able to do that this winter, it it didn't bother me quite. I mean, luckily for me, I was recovered enough to be able to, function, go get on a treadmill, all of that stuff before winter was really at its peak.
Mhm.
But all the things that people that live here do to get through winter, snowshoeing, skiing, all those things. So many of those were
I can
limited to me,
imagine
and
it.
I was like wearing shoes with spikes on them. You know what I mean? I was just like, I am gonna walk to the
Not ever
mailbox.
falling down again.
You know?
I will be upright when I die. It's going to
But
happen.
part of the healing process, there was a time post surgery I felt so vulnerable,
Yeah.
and then they said, "Oh, okay, well, you're pretty much okay to resume activities, more or less normal over the next couple of months." And that had been 8 months since I had been kind of completely knocked out, and then at like the 9 months. So we're talking like 6, 7 months, or maybe 5 months post surgery. I felt like a delicate, you know, I don't know what that could just be snapped at any given minute. But your body, it was gradual and kind of subtle, but there was a point at which I woke up with less fear, and then a little bit less fear, and then a little bit less fear. But in the back of your mind, that is always there, that I go on a trip, and can I really go down a giant water slide? Can I go on
No.
um, a jet ski? Some of those things that you would think, oh, I can do anything. Well, you could, but is it worth the risk?
Yeah.
And
You're gonna mess something up.
you become a
Maybe.
different person. Your post recovery, your post trauma person is different. And that is something, as I mentioned with my friend, it's almost impossible to go back to the life that you had. And she was expected to return to work,
Hmm.
and okay, your medical leave's up, you're good, here you go, here's your job. And it was
Yeah.
incredibly difficult, because that's just sort of how our system works, right? You don't get, okay, you don't have cancer anymore, all right, well, then you don't get any more disability.
Yeah.
And there's so much still happening with your body and your body recovering. So, I mean, it's different for every person, of course, but that's something that we've talked about. She and I have talked about a lot, because the person that you are before that trauma dies with that trauma a little
You're a different person every
differently
day, aren't you?
inside.
Aren't we different even when we experience a trauma that takes place in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
That whole shooting, which is the most recent one that's coming to memory, but that happens and then you just get knocked in the teeth
Yeah.
and you
We
don't
will
not even there. You don't
exactly.
see any bullets fly.
as a nation, we will never be the same post September 11th. I mean,
September 11th, yeah.
there, Sandy Hook, all of these like things that in your heart, it completely. I mean, it probably changes the shape of your heart molecules, really, because
Right.
that is even in the back of your mind, that there's the capacity for that. And
And
because
human beings.
you can't live your life and you can't keep your children next to you all the time, but it's not the same world that you knew 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And think of,
Same
our
exact
parents'
thing, right? This shit's been
generation.
happening. It's been happening since the 60s for some
Oh,
reason, where
exactly. I
somebody's
was just gonna
decided,
say, like, Vietnam, my dad was a Vietnam vet, and to be honest with you, there's a very high possibility that my spinal degeneration is directly related to Agent Orange. That is not out of the realm of possibility because
wow,
my dad was exposed to it and he experienced extreme spinal degeneration and has actually been granted 100% disability by the veterans, which, as you well know, is nearly
yeah, this is
impossible
impossible
to
to
get.
get.
And
Especially
there
for
are
somebody like him who's saying, hey, you
many,
did this to me. You
yep,
dropped the
many men
bomb.
in
I
his
sucked the
group
stuff in.
who were exposed to Agent Orange and had similar spinal degeneration. It's a
Yeah.
deterioration of the discs in your spine. And when you read about Agent Orange and you read about what it did to the people in Vietnam, you will find that children and grandchildren of people who were exposed to Agent Orange, even if they weren't pregnant at the time, we're not talking about like, okay, you were pregnant when it happened. You have it in your system. You actually can pass that on, and so you can inherit that the damage that was done. And
Yeah,
I'll
it's
tell you
weird,
that
isn't it?
I have the exact same. I have what my dad started having when he was younger than me. He had it younger, and his is more severe now, of course, because he's an older man. But it totally flashed through my mind because I remember doing a lot of research on it when he was applying for his status because, you just have to provide this tremendous amount of evidence and you have to be extremely well informed. And my mom was amazing and his complete champion. But I remember just looking into that and him telling me that some of the members of his veterans group had experienced even greater exposure than he had. They had been in a
What was
field
his job?
had been
What did he do over there?
he worked on he was in he had been trained to do electrical and communications. So he worked on the towers and set up like communication towers and did a lot of the electrical wiring for the bases and things like that. So it actually gave him awesome skills later on. He became an electrician and had his own business, worked for a big electric company. But he was there right during, they sprayed it right on him. I mean, they sprayed it right on everyone. It was the tactic. It was like, okay, we're just going to defoliate this entire jungle and then we'll know where everyone's hiding. I mean, that was
Yeah.
that was the strategy.
Especially around bases, right? I wasn't even thinking that. I was like, how do you get Agent Orange on? But they're trying to defoilize everything,
Yeah,
including right around their perimeters and whatnot.
it
They
was
want a
so
clear eye of sight.
toxic. It went into the water system. It went into so anyone who was there was exposed to it to some level if they were there during, those years. So we don't know that, right? Like we don't know 100%. We don't have a doctor saying, "Oh, yes, there's this and this." And always the big companies that make these products are always going to say, "Well, we need more evidence." And the evidence never comes on time. It comes 40 years down the road.
That was DuPont. I think.
DuPont, yep.
Yep. With the Agent Orange. I think they're the big guys with
Have
that
you
one.
seen there's been a couple of lawsuits in California about exposure to Roundup.
It
Two
just doesn't
lawsuits.
matter, does it? It just doesn't matter. We're not going to win anything.
They
They got to make
won.
it stop.
They won
What are
two
they call it
major
something else now.
lawsuits. One guy was awarded millions of dollars, and the other person was awarded I don't know, like 2.5 million. Now, doesn't change the fact that these guys have cancer. It's not going to
Right?
reverse their cancer.
And it
but
doesn't
it
change the
does
fact that they
show,
just call it something else, or they just change their tactics slightly to be below the law,
right,
or they hire somebody to do it put completely against the law.
rebrand it
I
and
mean,
sell it in Mexico. That's, it's like,
what's that? I mean, I'm a skeptic. I mean, not a
well,
skeptic. I'm a cynic.
I said they'll rebrand it,
Yeah,
relabel it, sell it in Mexico
not
or South
poison,
America or
not
something.
poison. That'll give you cancer. We promise that'll be the name of it, because they're
Right.
really unoriginal too.
This is not poison. This will not
This
give
is
you
not cancer causing.
absolutely not. Oh God.
Nope, we promise. We promise. We're good guys. I mean, DuPont's still alive and existing.
Oh
We know
yeah.
what they did.
A
We
lot of
know what other companies have done, right? We know that they do this to people and they still exist. You can buy stock in them right now. You can become rich yourself. Apple does horrible, horrendous stuff. I mean, what a trauma. I mean, that's what we were talking about. There's so much trauma happening. It's hard not to get excited about these stories on individual levels that we talked about for the last hour. There's so many moments that work in fiction and storytelling.
And you know what
Pirates.
though? That
Oh,
is
God. Let me tell you this. Go
that is
ahead. I'm
the silver
sorry.
lining, though.
I didn't hear you again. I apologize.
The silver lining of trauma is the art, is the story, is the
Yeah,
spontaneous
totally.
thought that turns into creation that comes out of it. And for myself, I had 4 different stories that developed out of that 3-month period at a time that I
Awesome.
probably otherwise would have been gallivanting about the lake drinking rosé, So
Oh, are you a rosé drinker? Oh, that's my image of you is gone. Gone completely.
come on now, it's a summer drink. It's
I
like
want,
summer red wine.
no, sorry.
Summer
I
red.
don't know. I don't know what I pictured you drinking, honestly. I never pictured you actually drinking anything. What?
My point is that I mean, I try to look at it like, okay, out of this time, many things were born that have potential and are, turning into other things, and that we as people and as creative people, yes, we're not the same because of that trauma, but that is possibly the best thing that could happen. There's a lot of cultures that believe, for example, a true shaman, somebody who's truly a healer or a shaman, actually has to experience a trauma in order to become a healer. It's not just a random person who says, "Oh, hey, I'm going to go down to Santa Fe and learn to smudge." It's somebody who has gone through something and come out on the
Smudge?
side and survive.
What's that? What's smudge?
Oh, like you burn sage and you smudge a house to
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Didn't you did tell me that you're a death doula, right?
No, we
you're
did
not.
talk about death doula. We did talk about death doulas and how they are a thing, and there's a growing movement. I am not a certified death doula. I have been at the death side of a couple people close to me.
It's
And
traumatic.
when they've died, and I think you and I talked about the cycle and the similarities between the rhythm of death and the rhythm of birth, and how they are these there's this suspension of time. If you've ever been, at someone's side as they are really kind of going into that final stage.
I just hope there is a suspension in time, right? That's the greatest curse of existence, is that we're weighed down by these seconds that keep passing, slamming themselves against us as we progress further and further along towards that moment. And it's the worst part about living. Can't do anything about it.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we're less conscious of it. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Maybe our body shuts down so much that that we have no choice. I think it's different for everyone, but we don't really know. We have some people who have had near-death experiences or have come back from the dead, but we really don't know what that moment's like. We have a lot of conjecture about it. A lot of speculation, one of our favorite things to do.
Oh, I love it so much. It's my favorite word,
We don't
too.
really know, and that not knowing is probably what drives us anyway. If we knew everything, why would we even bother getting up in the morning?
Be boring. make up something anyway. That's what we do. The flat Earth people are just the best imagination people out there. Like, obviously, the world is round, and you go, nope, it's flat. But
They're like,
look at all the evidence.
keep going,
No,
it's flat.
it's flat. So we want to believe it's flat. It's flat.
The moon conspiracy. There's always the moon conspiracy that comes up.
Anti-vaxxers. I mean, the list goes on and on. Do you have a confirmation bias? Nothing's going to knock you out of it except for yourself.
Right. And my favorite people to talk to are actually people who are malleable and allow me to be malleable. So if you have an idea or a concept, and I can actually listen to that, and I have an idea or a concept, and you can listen to that, you can change, you can be a strong and creative person and change your mind about things. And I think it actually feeds your strength to be able to consider that everything is completely different. Everything is topsy-turvy. It is not the same. But just like Alice, you don't really know that you're in a dream when you're in the middle of that, right? You're in survival mode, you're in day-to-day mode, you're in I got to get through this mode. It's not until you reflect back and think, damn, that was hard.
Yeah.
Because you look back at your trauma, your injury, your football injury, and you still feel so much about it. But in that time,
it still hurts.
What could you do?
Right? I mean, it's still injured. I mean, it's still like arthritis now. You know what I mean? There's calcium buildup in there. It's like
come back to haunt you, right? Yeah.
It's there. I mean, your back too. You know that there's a scar. You'll feel it when you're in the shower, probably, or maybe it rubs up against your belt. I don't know how it works, but
my disc is gone, so there's a popping. There's a constant hollow sound in the back of my spine that was never there before, and so I could be, doing dishes and I feel it. It doesn't hurt, but it's there, and it is a reminder that this thing happened to me.
Yeah. We have about 4 minutes left. I want to, you mentioned, excuse me, that's awesome. You mentioned Alice in Wonderland. I think you mentioned it last time we talked too. Is that your go-to trauma fiction? Do you have any others that you would recommend?
Frankenstein, right? We know that there's so much of what she wrote was born out of her own trauma. And
Who?
Mary Shelley, Frankenstein.
Oh, Mary Shelley, yeah. We talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about how, she had miscarriages and had this kind of challenging marriage or unconventional non-marriage to Percy until they were finally wed. And so she had a lot of trauma and was also reflecting what was happening in present day society. Alice in Wonderland, I never thought of as a trauma book until I was sitting on my deck one day, trying to sit in the sun and enjoy a semblance of a summer day while I was in agony. I had literally crawled outside, literally, because I couldn't be inside anymore. And I had crawled outside and was kind of sitting on this chair and thinking, and I was trying to go through some paperwork. So I thought, well, I'll look at this in the outside. And that's when I had that epiphany of like, okay, one hand does not know what the other side is doing. And I even called the insurance company and said, I was told not to pay this. And they said, oh, well, let me look in and I said, you might want to call your billing department if you're sending people terrifying bills that are, thousands and thousands of dollars that they don't actually owe. You might want to talk to the people who told me not to pay it. It's a suggestion. Call your coworkers. But
right. That's a huge company.
Of the white rabbit that you're chasing is your health. I had always thought of Alice in Wonderland as an allegory for a lot of other things, but I really connected it with trauma and the maze that we go through and the characters that we meet along the way that promise us something. And, just Alice is trying to navigate this insane world, but she doesn't really know why. And then she goes to the queen, and the queen is the one in charge. And then, she kind of makes her mad. So And there's a lot of things with Alice in Wonderland that we know were happening politically and all this kind of stuff, but I had this real strong connection with it as, falling down that rabbit hole, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. That's your insurance company.
Why don't you? I was just thinking while we were talking that somebody needs to write a story about insurance navigation and make it fun.
And make
I'm
it fun.
pretty sure Lewis Carroll wasn't writing about insurance navigation in 18, whatever the hell. You know what I mean? But it makes sense. What you're talking about makes sense.
It does. I actually started writing an essay about Alice in Wonderland as a, imagine you're trying to go through some kind of medical trauma or through some kind of medical situation, and everything from diagnosis to you've got the Mad Hatter who's just throwing things at you. You've got cookies that change your you've got the caterpillar. Maybe he's the wise surgeon that you really have to jump through hoops to go and see. You've got all these different, you got cookies that make you bigger and drinks that make you smaller. And some of those things work and some of them don't. And all the while you're chasing this white rabbit, and the white rabbit's your health. I think that's what you're chasing.
Yeah, that totally. This is working for me as an analogy for that book.
Yeah. And you don't even have to really know all the ins and outs of Alice in Wonderland. Most people know the plot, right? But there are some subtle things that happen in the book that even apply. There's a sea of tears that she swims in. And that happens right after she falls down into the hall.
You know what we're doing next time? We're talking about this book.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. I don't think we've done that yet. Maybe even Lewis Carroll will break him open, because I think in memory he's a heroin addict, right? He was a big.
There was a bunch of stuff about him that people. There's a lot of weirdness surrounding him. His relationship with children, his relationship with drugs. But this book has become this icon of childhood, and I'll tell you what, this is like for me. This is like Frankenstein. I know this book so well, and I know.
Good.
So
I'm excited.
Yeah, a good discussion.
Let's do it.